We said just one drink at 11:59. The night heard, make it complicated. I'm not jealous of bodies, I'm jealous of permission. Bodies tell the truth if you stop staging them. Permission is a fiction everyone agrees to until someone doesn't. At 11:59, the bartender at Tidal slid 2 glasses across a counter that believed in reflections more than sobriety and said, "Just one." He smiled at us like he'd been tipped in secrets all week. I glanced at Marco. He glanced at me. We said just one in 2 different languages and meant the same mistake. We weren't supposed to be there. The plan had been a kiss at home, a bottle with the good label, a half-finished film, and the kind of sex that knows you by your old names. But we'd argued at dinner about something small that grew a spine, and then he'd said, "Let's go out, it'll reset us." And then we stood under Tidal's sign with the wind pinning our coats back like an invitation. The bar was a rectangle of light with a piano at one end and an arrangement of low couches that made everyone rehearse their angles. When Marco took off his scarf, I remembered the first time I wanted him, how the line of his throat made grammar irrelevant. He smiled at me like a truce we could believe in. That's when I noticed the man at the piano watching him. Not watching us. Watching him like a song already learning its bridge. His name was Raphael. He said it like a dare, crisp as fruit. He knew Marco from a festival in Lisbon, the kind of fact that turns a stranger into a road sign. The piano was his, he said, though technically it belonged to the bar and emotionally to anyone who needed an alibi. He played the first few notes of a thing Marco had written 3 years ago, and Marco laughed, surprised enough to forgive history. I sipped. The drink tasted like citrus and the past. Raphael asked what we were, and I said, "We're still deciding which word deserves us." And Marco said, "Old," which is his way of flirting with honesty. Raphael said he had a thing to show us upstairs, which is the kind of sentence that makes you either leave or agree to be a different person for an hour. We agreed. The hallway was narrow enough to make law out of physics. Raphael walked ahead of us, and the hotel carpet forgave our footsteps. He held the elevator with the posture of a man used to being useful. In the espio of the lift, I watched us multiply. Marco in 4 angles that all knew me. Me in 4 angles that wanted different futures. Raphael leaning back, one hand on the door, half a smile he hadn't used yet. He pressed the button with his thumb like a secret. The doors shut on the part of me that believes in plans. The room upstairs was not extravagant. It had the plain shamelessness of a bed that knew its job and a window that tried to pretend the city wasn't doing anything it'd be ashamed to write down. Raphael said he wanted to play us something without the audience that downstairs always invented. He sat at a keyboard that looked bored by distance and started with a melody that belonged to someone we used to be. Marco stood next to him, hands in his pockets, and the line of his shoulder told me what his mouth would be too cautious to. I moved to the window and watched our reflection become a version of us with a third body stitched in. When Raphael stopped, Marco put a hand on his back to say thank you, and the gratitude slid sideways. Marco's palm stayed an extra sentence long. Raphael turned to face him without stepping back. My mouth became a door. Marco looked at me. I didn't look away, not because I was brave, but because I had grown tired of making the mirror do all the work. He kissed Raphael first. It was not dramatic, or maybe I was too busy inventorying pain to award points. It was careful, and then it learned less careful. The way good ideas always disobey their first draft. I walked to them, and Marco's hand found my wrist. The algorithm of us has always included an if-then branch we never tested out loud. If the night said complicated and we believed it, then would our bodies remember the promise beneath the promises? I kissed Marco's cheek, and then his mouth. I kissed Raphael because the room had made prophecy out of our delay. He tasted like lime and rehearsal. Marco tasted like the part of a fire that learns to be warm and not burn. We didn't break the bed. We shook hands with it like men who recognize good furniture. Shirts opened, belts gave up, mouths learned names faster than ears could. There's a way to put your hand on a man's chest that makes him remember the first answer he ever trusted. Raphael had a scar below his ribs, and I put my mouth on it because some maps deserve respect. Marco laughed into my throat like repentance in a better tongue. The window put a silver gloss on us, and the city outside did its staged indifference, which is a service I will always pay for. I am not interested in writing what we did as bullet points. We were not bullets. We were unarmed and dangerous. We were three men who decided to warm a night that would have frozen us into versions we already knew. There was a moment when Raphael's fingers braided with Marco's while my mouth learned something worth sending a thank you note about. And in that moment I recognized the exact weight of betrayal and how light it can be when everyone lifts it. There was another when Marco turned my face toward his and said my name the way it used to sound, and I forgave a year without being asked. The things we did belonged to the room and to our bodies and to no one sensible. The only important fact is that they were done, and that afterward I could still find my way to the part of the bed where Marco's shoulder would shelter my mouth. After, we pretended to be professionals about it. Raphael said he was bad at sleeping and worse at saying stay. Marco said he hated leaving even when he was already gone. I said I didn't want to decide anything at 2 in the morning, because decisions may then tend to dress like consequences in the morning. We laughed because laughing is how a body thanks itself for not breaking. The elevator at 307 had a less generous mirror. Downstairs, the bartender nodded like a man who has signed several NDAs and none of them were worth the paper. We stepped into the air which had chosen to be clean. A cab asked if we wanted to be delivered or forgiven. We chose delivered. At home, the lock cleared its throat politely and the threshold did not refuse our feet. In the kitchen, the orange magnet held our rules with the patience of a nurse. We didn't add a line. We didn't erase an old one. We made eggs and ate them leaning against the counter like men who had done manual labor. Marco washed the pan with excessive sincerity. I stood behind him and put my hand under his shirt, on the flat good animal of his stomach, and felt everything and nothing at once. He turned and kissed me like a quiet oath. We took each other back to bed so the house could learn what the hotel already knew. That desire is not a moral, it is a tool, and tools can be used to build or pry apart. Mourning is impolite. It insists on definition. We drank coffee and let the definitions wait on the porch. I told Marco I didn't want a life that needed footnotes in other people's rooms. He said he didn't want to keep writing bridges for songs that refused destinations. I asked if this was our last night or our first honest one. He said he didn't know, and I believed him because belief is the only skill I'm proud of. We agreed on 2 sentences without writing them on the fridge. If we're going to teach another room our names, we teach it together. If we can't teach the room to say here, we don't call it home. A week later, the night tested us, as nights do when they think they've been generous. An email with kind fonts and a map promised 7 days of light that forgives you. Marco forwarded it with every attachment like a man showing his pockets. I want to go without disappearing, he wrote. I'll send pages, not alibis. When I get back, ask me what I wrote before you ask me what I did. I taped 2 lines to the fridge, addresses in the open, a good night here voice note every day, and counted the tiles on the kitchen floor because arithmetic is kinder than jealousy. He went. He came back with a suitcase that didn't slam and a face that remembered how to belong to him. He put 2 pages on the table. They're not good, he said. They're mine, I said, and we called that revision. Raphael existed again too because cities are small when you owe them a scene. We saw him at a gallery pretending to be about photographs. He smiled at us like forgiveness had a coat check. We talked about Lisbon and pianos and the ethics of nostalgia. We didn't make an appointment. We didn't avoid one either. Last night, because brains are teenagers who dare you to touch bruises, I scrolled back to the live photo that made me stupid at 12:41 and pressed and held. The room inhaled, the zipper, the faucet, the soft corrections. I heard the laugh and it was smaller than the sentence I built from it. I heard my breath, the one I keep forgetting I control. I let the clip finish and did not press it again. At 7:05 this morning, I filmed the coffee because ritual is cheaper than religion and works better on Tuesdays. I wrote here in the caption because words like addresses. Marco slid his hand into the frame, palm to mine without touching, a lid that doesn't claim to seal. Here, he said. The plant kept being stubborn. The house kept being a room that we choose in the plural. If another night offers us a kindness in the shape of a mistake, an elevator that multiplies our faces and confuses us into certainty, a bar that thinks it can bless what it seduces, a bed that wants credit for learning 3 names, I hope I remember the handful of humiliating, useful acts that kept us almost honest. Put water on. Move the chair. Ask why before who. Wait for the key in the lock like it's a sound you can tune to. Let the title cards keep their nouns. The rest, mirrors that practice cruelty, bathrooms that think they are cinemas, voices that rehearse in other throats, can rest in the background where they belong. If we're any good at this, we'll keep being the address. And if we can't, we'll at least be the map that knows how to admit when it's wrong and still trace a way home.